briefly, I'll just mention one thing. Islamic movements over the last 100 to 150 years. In 1924, the last remnant of what was an Islamic state falls. This is the Ottoman Empire, of course, right? The Ottomani state. It collapses in 1924. Since then, you have the birth of several movements all over the world, India, the Africas, in the Arab world, that are trying to revive Islam. They're trying to bring Islam back. Right? And writers talked about how there need to be movements and groups that need to bring back, and this rhetoric started of developing an Islamic state. So pretty much every major movement in the last 150 years talked about the revival of Khilafah, bringing Khilafah back, and quoting all the hadith that talk about the Khilafah, and looking at the seerah and saying, look, this is what the Messenger did, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, this is what we need to do. In other words, tying their struggle directly to the seerah of the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Now, in one sense, that's very good, in the sense that we need to tie our struggle always to the struggle of the Messenger alayhi salatu wasalam. But in one sense, this is oversimplification. When we take lessons from the seerah, we cannot ignore the time, the place, and the changes that have taken place. So you cannot copy-paste lessons, you have to apply them very carefully. This requires a lot of detailed understanding of the time and place in which you live. And so I want to present to you something that actually one of my very dear teachers and colleagues, and to me actually an intellectual role model, who's a member of this community, Brother Bashir Ansari, wrote in Al Jazeera. He wrote an article in Al Jazeera, Al-Islamiyun bayna dawla wa la dawla. I thought it was fantastic, really. I studied it with him when I took it with me to Detroit, and I thought it was just absolutely stunning, this article. And I hope to actually get it translated and make it available to you guys. And the subject of the article was Islamists, meaning Islamic movements, caught between having a state and not having a state. Right? This idea of statehood. In other words, two things became equation. Establishment of deen equals establishment of a state. This idea was made common. If you want to establish the deen, you have to have a government. You have to have a state. I don't mean New Jersey, I mean like a government state, okay? As in statehood. So this idea is actually what he questions. And he says, what are the roots of this idea and what are the problems with this idea? First of all, most of the movements that called for a state have had no experience or idea or know-how how to run a state. What does it take to run a government? Sanitation, police, roadmaps, taxation, right? Huge bureaucracy. I mean, if you work in a big company with 500 employees plus, governments are the biggest kinds of organizations in existence. They're the most colossal organization with the most number of employees. It is a massive, massive bureaucracy. So you have a movement that says we should have an Islamic state, we should have this and that and the other, but they don't have even close to the roadmap to what it takes to build a complex state. You cannot compare that to the life in Medina. Medina was simple, easy. These people didn't need governments and a water department and a taxation department and a municipality, and they didn't need these things. They just had simple hut homes, and they were living in tribal lives. Now they're a little bit more organized. It's a very preliminary form of a state that the Messenger established, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. For that, society was very advanced, but compared to what we have now, it's very simple. So to say we're just going to go establish and say, if you give these movements, let's say, you know what, we're ready to give you the state. Here, take Pakistan. Take it. You can have it. What are they going to do? How are they going to run it? Do they have the credentials to actually budget, to finance a budget, to engage in policing and things like that? They don't have the wherewithal. These are things that require a high degree of expertise. And by the way, let me tell you something else that he mentioned in the article that to me was mind-blowing. A movement, when Muslims are trying to say Muslims need to wake up and we need to stand up and we need to establish the deen, these are the kinds of things I can give in a khutbah and people might say, Takbir! Right? Everybody's going to, yeah! Iqamatul deen! But, so movements can fire people up. They can invigorate people. They can inspire people. People can read the works of people like Maududi rahimahullah or Sayyid Qutb rahimahullah and to this day be moved. Right? And be like, or Maulana Ilyas rahimahullah, these people, they can read them and say, wow, that's amazing stuff. But tell me which country in the world today looks at its government and say, they are so awesome. I love those guys in government.